welcome thing to read. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the May 21st, 2024 Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board meeting. We'll read the usual welcome and then we'll get started with the substantive items. So this meeting is being held virtually and is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medical Cannabis based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Public notice of this meeting was provided as required under Utah's open meeting laws and was posted on the Utah Public Notice website. In compliance with Utah's open meetings law, this meeting is being recorded. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the unapproved minutes will be posted to the Public Notice website within 30 days of this meeting. Approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days after board approval. Every proposed agenda item must have a one-page summary of the topic submitted to the MCPAB at utah.gov email no later than 7 days prior to the board meeting. Board members will present the one-page summary during board meetings and board members will discuss the summary. If no written summary is provided to board staff, the relevant agenda item will be removed from the agenda. Only agenda items that have been submitted in writing in advance of board meetings will be allowed during discussion by the board chair, including presentations from the public. Board members will then request additional presentation and memorandums on the agenda item from relevant bodies to be presented at the next board meeting. Those presentations and memos will also need to be submitted to the MCPAB at utah.gov email 7 days prior to the board meeting. All right, public comment instructions. So general instructions. Public comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time, you must request it from the chair. The chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. The public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create or remove public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. You can look over public comment guidelines that are posted on the Utah Public Notice website. When making a comment, please state your name and your affiliation so it can be reflected in the meeting minutes. Only comments made on items listed on the agenda will be considered. If you have a comment about an item not listed on the agenda, please email them to mcpab@utah.gov. For those making public comments, over Zoom, the Zoom public chat will be disabled during Zoom meetings. When the chair indicates it is time for public comments, you will raise the hand. You will use the raise hand icon on Zoom to indicate that you would like to make a comment. When you are called on, you will be taken off mute. Please then take 2 minutes to make your comment. For those making comments in person, please sign in on the public comment sign-in sheet with your name and indicate what agenda item you want to make a comment on. The chair will indicate when it is time for the public comment period. The board chair will call on you when it is your turn and you will come to the public comment table. Please then take 2 minutes to make your comment. As a reminder, if you are in person, please do not speak when others are presenting. Our mics are very sensitive and those attending over Zoom cannot hear when there is more than one person talking at a time. Side conversations and comments from the public during this board meeting are prohibited. And because we've had some issues with the audio in the past, hopefully today it will be better. When you are speaking, please use a voice that is louder than your typical one when speaking, commenting, or presenting. When you speak, please lean in towards the table as if there is a microphone. And for additional information, to make a suggestion for agenda items or to contact board members or staff, send an email to mcpab@utah.gov. Goodness, I can still do that. Okay, so now we're on to approval of the 2024 minutes. Has everyone had a chance to, the April 2024 minutes, has everyone had a chance to review those minutes? Did anybody have any, note any errors or any corrections we need to make? Okay, if not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the April 2024 minutes in a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. All right, passes unanimously. Okay, so administrative business. So the first thing that I did want to talk about is next month we will be holding elections for the board chair and vice chair positions. During this last legislative session, as part of Representative Brooks's bill, they included some language around who may be board chair or vice chair. And the clarification that they made in statute, which I believe was just a matter of happenstance with how we elected our vice chair and chair for this last year, that only one member of industry, so really Matt or myself, only one of us could be the board chair or vice chair. So we'll just want to keep.
It's also Des. It's anyone that's
Oh, is Des?
industry appointed.
Oh, so Des is the other one.
She's
Okay,
the other, yes.
awesome. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the correction. So only one of the three of us could serve as board chair or vice chair at any one time. The other, chair or vice chair will need to be a non-industry appointed member. It's not that, right?
Is it industry appointed?
It's not,
No, it's a-
I'm not an industry.
Either the
appointed.
chair or vice chair have to be appointed by DHHS, as in a DHHS appointee.
That's right.
So Des is a DHHS
Yeah.
appointee.
He could be the second.
That was what my.
I thought we had three.
You two and Jimmy are.
Oh,
you
Jimmy.
definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's okay.
So-
I knew
okay.
there were three.
Yeah,
So it's Jimmy, so either myself, Matt, or Jimmy could only hold one of the two seats. Okay, awesome. Thanks for the clarification. If anyone is interested in either nominating themselves or nominating someone else, you're of course welcome to do it when we get to the meeting, next month. But it might be preferable to provide that information to the, to Trevor or to Abby ahead of time, so we can kind of understand who's going to want to, who's interested. Because I doubt it'll be the same as it was last year, where Matt nominated himself after a long bit of silence. There might be more people that are interested this year. So per our bylaws, it's just a simple majority vote. So if we have two people running for the same position, it will just be done by a majority vote. If we have three that are interested in a position, I guess we'll have to figure out how that works. But again, it would just be a simple majority. And if we can't get a majority, well, then we'll have to figure out some sort of compromise in how we can get to a majority. But that will be probably one of the first things we do next month, actually, probably right after we approve the minutes for this month. We will do the election. I'll save my thank you speech for everyone for next month. But it has been a true pleasure to be the first board chair for the board. So another little bit of administrative business. This is more just personal to me. I had the wonderful opportunity of traveling out to Washington, D.C. This past week for the National Cannabis Industry Association's lobby days. I'll say it was weird to be in a suit. It's been a while, but it all came back to me. But it was wonderful. We were well received. The NCIA is a wonderful organization, pushing for, cannabis decriminalization at the federal level. And we also had the added benefit of being there at the same time that the Biden administration announced, formal proposed rulemaking around rescheduling. We probably won't get into it in this meeting, but I do think at some point it would warrant discussion by the board of what rescheduling is going to mean, what the timeline for rescheduling looks like. They have, as with all rulemaking, they are soliciting public comment. I know that we as a company do plan to provide public comment. I would encourage anyone as a member of the public, someone that touches the plant or someone that doesn't touch the plant, to provide written comment. Because if it is treated like a Schedule III substance, it's going to be a very different world. As Schedule III substances are currently treated, it's gonna be a very different world for every single person in this room. So I think it's critical. So while a step in the right direction, it is certainly not the final step. I would encourage all of you to lobby your federal congressmen and women to go further than just rescheduling, because there's going to, even with rescheduling, there will have to be some other law changes, for cannabis to, for us to all do what we continue to do. So it was wonderful. We had a great time out there, got a chance to actually meet with most of our federal delegation while we were out there as well. So it was a nice trip. So and I think that is all that I had for administrative business, unless anybody has anything else. Okay, we'll move on to the update from DHHS. Rich, go ahead.
great. So this morning we sent out the survey that we discussed at our last meeting. We were able to get input from board members, thank you, and also from other stakeholders about what the survey looked like. What this survey was sent to was about 14,000 medical cannabis cardholders whose cards expired within the past year. And so we've already received about just over 700 responses to it. It was sent out about 3 hours ago. And the two main questions are, why didn't you renew your medical cannabis card? And why would you get a medical cannabis card again? And the deadline to respond is June 4th. And with that first question of why didn't you renew, there's some sub questions depending on what they select. That helps us to learn just a little bit more about what that population is like. So again, this did not go to current card holders. It was only to those who have allowed their card to expire during the past year. If it expired within the past 60 days, it wasn't sent to them. Only those that had expired over 60 days ago, but within the past year. So that's an update on that. And obviously we'll share the results of that with the group once we get those results, and deadline is June 4th.
So likely at our next meeting, you guys will have at least some
Yeah,
preliminary
2
data.
week. Right, yeah, they're
Okay.
giving them 2 weeks to respond to that, and we'll send out a reminder in a week of that. Also, just by way of information, a survey that we just started doing, anyone that applies for a new medical cannabis card or attempts to, or does actually renew their card, that at the bottom of the email that they get when they're notified of that action being taken, there's a link to a survey they can take where they're able to rate their level of satisfaction with our services. If they contacted us to receive assistance over the phone or via email, then they're able to provide us feedback about that experience. And so we've received some feedback so far, and some of the topics that come up are items that we're addressing with our new software. And so it's exciting to see that, hey, we already have some plans in place to address some of those. There's questions, for example, or challenges that are reported regarding payment for the medical cannabis card fee, and that the fact that pop-ups come up will be addressed in our new software launch. So anyway, that is just something I thought was noteworthy to share. As many of you know, the University of Utah they were awarded some funding to do a study, and that study will be completed in July. But what they're doing is they've been already accepted. They've had their abstract accepted at 4 different conferences. They're waiting to hear back from a 5th one, and it's either a presentation at the conference or a poster presentation. And so other states are going to be able to learn more about the information that they were able to glean from the study. The study is titled "The Study of Utahns' Beliefs and Experiences with Integrative Medicine," or the acronym is SUBLIME. And it was conducted with help from the Center for Medical Cannabis. And so that is just a little bit of information about that. Also, within the past month, we met with the Utah Substance Use and Mental Health Advisory Council, or otherwise known as USAVE. And JD, I gave you a heads up about this, but Kemi Clark and I joined that meeting. We were able to just share with them some responses to questions they had about the pharmacist renewal proposal that was discussed at an earlier meeting of MCPAB. And after discussing the topic for a period, they voted to not be in support of that proposal if it ever were to come before lawmakers. And they had some of the same concerns and discussion that came up during the board meeting that we had. And just for everybody's knowledge, also USAVE is actually moving from criminal justice over to Department of Health and Human Services in the next few months. And so that'll be a partner that we'll be working with in the future, I think, a little more closely, as they'll be under DHHS. And as a reminder, the pharmacy renewal proposal was tabled by the board during the meeting, and despite that it was tabled, USAFE still wanted to take a vote about the general proposal, and that's what they voted to do with it. Also, the Center for Medical Cannabis purchased booth space at the annual Utah physician assistant nurse practitioner conference at Snowbird. That's scheduled for July 31 to August 2nd. And this is us just sharing information about the medical cannabis program and appropriate treatment of patients with medical cannabis. We're looking forward to that opportunity to share more information about the program. Also, during the past month, we just on April 23rd, well, actually, let's see, or the Ogden Surgical Medical Society Conference. We presented that on May 16, and that was Dr. McKiff and I. He's chair of the Cannabis Research Review Board, and we shared information with them about Utah's program and about treatment of medical conditions with medical cannabis. So there's about 40 medical providers that attended that, and we always enjoy those opportunities. So also, we had a virtual meeting with stakeholders on April 23rd, just before the new statutes became effective on May 1st. Shared a lot of information about the new laws that were coming into effect, and also talked about software changes coming up. That was a good opportunity to engage with stakeholders. And that is all. Any questions? I didn't share our program statistics. May 1st, as of May 1st, 2024, we're at 86,000 active medical cannabis cardholders and about 955 QMPs and 77 pharmacy medical providers or pharmacists. And if anybody wants additional information, it's always updated monthly on our website.
I did want to ask about obviously I know the UAT testing is going on right now for the ICS and everything. Are you all still on track to have EVS, the new version of the EVS available at the same time as the ICS? Will they all go live at the same time?
Yes, there's always wild cards that come up during testing, and there could be some items that take a little bit more time to address, but.
And are you guys doing similar like user acceptance testing to what UDAF is doing for the ICS for
We've already
EVS?
done it.
You guys have already done that.
Right,
Okay.
but one of the critical steps is to do testing with the two systems
Together.
after having been tested for their own purposes. We got to test them together.
Did you guys do that EVS testing, like just like your own user acceptance testing, or did you do that through the pharmacies with the PMPs and or QMPs?
We completed our own internal testing, and then we opened it up to some trusted stakeholders at medical cannabis pharmacies and medical clinics, a limited number of those representatives just during the past week. And so they're able to go in and test in the sandbox and share anything that they believe is a bug. We've given them instructions on what to test in the new system. So
I think
that's
one thing
ongoing.
that's been helpful is the wide user acceptance testing, right? Because it's not just about finding bugs. That's incredibly critical, right? But we're also going to all be asked to work in a brand new system from one day to the next, right? So I would encourage you all to do as much user acceptance testing as possible, not just to find bugs, but to make sure people are comfortable and feel like they can be compliant, right? Because ultimately it's going to fall on us if we don't know how to use a system. But I do think it hamstrings operators and QMPs a little bit to say, oh, well, we only tested this with 5 or 10 people. I really do appreciate the way UDAF has done it. Not only do I think you'll get more feedback, right? But I also think people will be more comfortable day one when we hit the ground running. So I would encourage you all to maybe, broaden that user acceptance testing, because our company's been, has been all over it. And I think not only will it make the system better, but I think it will cut down on the compliance errors, because it would be a real tough pill to swallow to know that you are out of compliance because you didn't have the chance to get familiar with software before it went live. I think that's a big concern for, for folks, and I know that's been a concern for us. So I would just offer that as just one piece of feedback, I think.
Great. Yeah, we appreciate the feedback.
Anything from anybody else on the DHHS updates? Okay, we will turn it over to Dr. Forsyth and Mr. James for any UDAF updates.
Great. So as has been alluded to, UAT for the ICS hub went live this Monday. It hasn't been perfect so far. We've had several access problems, just getting people the right permissions to be able to get into the system. But I've been in the system a bit myself, and it does seem to be working. We are expecting to see several issues, so nobody should panic. This is UAT. We're supposed to be seeing problems and fixing them here. But we're pretty pleased with what we're seeing so far, and we really appreciate industry members who have taken the time to help develop this system, because there have been a lot of industry members who have participated in the scoping and development of the system, and it really has yielded, I think it will yield great benefits for the entire industry. This is kind of a new model for all the states, and I hope that it's a model that takes off, because it gives the states and the producers greater control over their data. That being said, it's gonna be a rough start. Like, we're probably gonna have some issues. MJ Freeway was a pretty rough start too. All data systems are rough starts. So we're expecting that, but we really do think that we're gonna be able to get to a good place very quickly with this. To a much better place where we have better control over our data and better access to provide data and feedback to patients and to DHHS, to each other really. To be able to make good informed decisions on what we're doing in this market that will ultimately benefit patients. Other than that, the THCO acetate stuff, we've actually had several samples come through our laboratories recently that have 0 THCO acetate in them. And we're seeing levels drop all the time in what we do see THCO acetate in. We recently had one that just barely failed as a concentrate, but still qualified to pass through to be used for other products. So overall, I think we're still seeing this trend in the right direction, and since producers are being very responsible and responsive to this health concern for patients.
Have you guys seen any issues with, I know there was a bit of a, where things were co-alluding, with THCO. Have you been seeing that similarly with CBTC, co-alluding with terpenes?
No. Not that I've seen.
You may want to reach out to the other lab and ask them. We did have an issue recently,
Okay.
where they identified a terpene as CBTC. So just trying to get that under wraps, but we were one of those folks to submit a sample, so with no THCO acetate, which I was excited. I was dancing around in my house.
I
So when
saw that one. I was pretty.
yeah, I was pretty excited. Great potency and stuff too. And
Uh-huh.
honestly, it's a testament to our teams. I'm sure everyone's teams are doing the same thing, but we have, not only our extraction manager, but our lab manager, working tirelessly, working weekends to try to figure this stuff out. So excited that, things are trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I really do think this ultimately is a very big benefit to patients who are going to end up with some of the cleanest concentrates in the United States. And it's also beneficial to producers, because when you don't have other contaminants present in degradation products, you have more of what you're actually looking for. And so long term, this really does benefit everybody, even if it was a bit painful in the leading up to it.
Yeah.
Do you have any items?
I could probably just add that, the rules, that we had been planning on switching over to R66 has now done that as of last week. There are a couple of exceptions on the cannabis side. One is the independent lab, rule, which is still in R68, because we did make a change to allow those labs not just to have to destroy some of their samples. Will be able to send that to a university for research, as well as our testing rules that were open, getting some changes made probably in the THCO acetate aspect. So those are still R68 rules under plant industry. And once those rules go into effect, those changes go into effect, then we'll actually start making that move for them over to R66 rules. But the rest of those rules are actually in R66 now.
Excellent. All right. Any questions for Dr. Forsyth or Cody before we turn it right back over to them for some rules updates?
So for members of the research community who are interested in testing compounds, would they contact Dr. Forsyth directly
Yeah,
to
you can reach
establish
out.
that? Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think there's been some comments that maybe there's some people that can't hear that well. So just emphasize,
Okay.
use a lot of voice.
How close can I get to this thing?
Position your
I can hear
body
really good
forward
this
as you
time.
speak.
So you guys are doing
Maybe
amazing.
that
I
makes
can
a
hear
difference.
everything, which is,
Des, how,
amazing.
Des, I think she's talking,
muted.
I can't hear.
Either that or we
I'm
don't have
I'm
volume
talking-
I
for
don't
them.
think she's muted.
No, she's not.
I'm not muted.
let's
Yeah,
check.
check the app.
Nanette says she can hear.
Your prayers were answered.
Okay.
You just can't hear me.
I'm gonna get a megaphone for
Des, we
next,
can't hear you.
next meeting.
For real.
That's,
They
yeah,
prevented-
Des, I can hear you.
I can hear Nanette.
Oh,
Can you
no,
hear
no,
Nanette?
Megaphone.
They had to shout, yeah,
No
they had a
kidding.
megaphone and then were told by Capitol Police they could not use it, so.
Can you hear us now?
This lobbyist storming the Capitol.
Can y'all hear me?
Nanette, can you
hear us?
So
Yes.
Des and Nanette, I can hear you
There we
both.
go. We can
Yeah,
hear
we
you.
can hear the people online.
We just can't hear the,
I
We can-
think their prayers were answered. They just can't hear me, and that's
I think maybe ours were.
Now we can't hear you.
We can hear.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry. We'll take back the prayers comment. Yeah, no, I can hear you guys really good this time. So I'm loving this. So
Great, thank
who
you.
can't hear? Did somebody say they cannot?
No, Abby just told me to remind people to speak out,
Oh, okay.
and I thought that that was an indication that maybe someone couldn't, but
Somebody had.
okay, someone had messaged Abby about it, so anyway.
Yes, please interrupt at any point during the meeting if you get a message that says they cannot hear you. This has to be the first time in my life I've been told that someone can't hear me.
Yeah.
So strange times, I guess. I do want to turn it over to, again, right back to Dr. Forsythe and Cody James to go over the two draft pharmacy rules, R 66-5 and R 66-9.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask you, how in depth would you like me to go through? Do you want me to go and explain every change, or do you want to get more of a summary?
I mean, I can, but I mean, I could also tell you the one little,
Questions?
the only part I have that's a question. Yeah, just around transport manifests, but other than that, everything seemed to be pretty copacetic, and it seemed like you were either integrating things that were required by statute, or you were making things somewhat like, more congruent between what your rules are for processors and cultivators and now for pharmacy. So I don't necessarily need you to go line by line, but I can't speak for others. I've had a chance to read this. And like I said, I only highlighted one thing that I wanted to discuss just since it's 2024. And I feel like digital stuff is not a bad idea at this point in time.
Yeah,
So
I will benefit to pleases the board. I will just go page by page, but give a summary.
okay.
JD, you're exactly right. Obviously, there's a number of these changes in this rule that were based on statutory changes. Some of that was in DHHS's cleanup bill, which they still had some things that were in their statute even after the switch for us taking over pharmacies in 2023. So they had that in the cleanup bill, which is why on the first page you see some switches to reference 441A versus 26B there. On the other hand, as you mentioned, JD, there are some things that we felt like weren't clear after we had taken over the rules from DHHS and the board members. We actually pretty much just copied and pasted that rule and didn't have any real substantial changes yet. So there's a couple of cleanup things, and as you mentioned, a lot of those just kind of make these rules go or to make those more similar to what our other rules are for the production side of things, such as transportation manifests and record keeping requirements for visitors, things like that. But let me just quickly go through this. As I mentioned on page 1, under the definition of PNP, it did in the DHHS cleanup bill, it did just change that reference over from their statute to our statute. The same with targeted marketing on the bottom side of that. So going to pretty much page 3 under the operating plan. There's an addition to the statute that in 2 bills actually that talked about how the PIC would need to determine the pharmacist's medical cannabis inventory. And so we put it in 2 different places. One was under the operating plan to make sure that the pharmacy themselves was going to verify, or at least have a plan on how they're going to allow the PIC to determine that inventory. And then a little bit lower in the pharmacy in charge portion under R 66-5-5. it does say that, the PMP, or sorry, the PIC shall determine the medical, cannabis pharmacist's inventory of medical cannabis and medical cannabis products. We thought that, based on statutory, language, that would best to put that wording in both places, kind of to spread that liability, if you will, between the two, make sure the pharmacy and the PIC are on the same page. Under R66-5-6, which is supervision, we just felt like we could be a little bit more clear. So instead of just saying, the cannabis pharmacy licensee is always under the charge of a medical cannabis pharmacy PIC, we put full and actual, just to make sure that there wasn't just something that was being passed off as such. A little bit further down, you can see that we did change having video camera and recording equipment to support the recording of at least 5 minutes to just to remove any time frame. We believe that the statutory requirements really means that we should be able to continue to do work without the recordings happening. And then farther down there, you saw just the letters being changed. This was actually kind of a holdover. What we noticed after we changed our rules is that there was actually a mislettering. They actually did not have one of the letters we needed, so we just finally corrected that at that time. So on to page 5. We did add that a medical cannabis PMP shall carry their pharmacy medical provider registration card at all times when they're in the premises of the pharmacy and that they are transporting cannabis in the dosage form. What we had found during our time inspecting this is that there was time that the PMP was not carrying their card, which put themselves in obviously jeopardy if they ever get caught by law enforcement. So we wanted to verify or clarify that as well. And then a little bit further, as I mentioned earlier, just an update to the visitors log. We'll just actually putting some regulation into what visitors log was pretty open before that, and so based on input from some questions we was getting from some pharmacies, we just decided to make those very similar to our other licensees. Nothing really but a number change on page 6. Moving on to page 7 here under R68-6510. We see that talks about printed transport manifests. Again, making this a little bit similar to other licensees. So what this says is a printed transport manifest shall accompany each transport of cannabis. The manifest shall contain the following information: the cannabis pharmacy address and the license number of the departure location, physical address and license number of the receiving location, strain name, quantities by way, excuse me, and unique identification numbers of each cannabis material to be transported, date and time of departure, estimated date and time of arrival, and the name and signature for each agent accompanying the cannabis. Again, this is for pharmacies that will possibly either moving product to another pharmacy, or possibly, if it ever does happen, back to a processor or something like that. Again, just making it similar to the other licensing regulations.
So that wouldn't apply to home deliveries?
No, the home delivery would still be the same as it.
So within the home delivery context, you could still do a digital or a printed manifest.
Correct.
So this is just for going between pharmacies or back to a processor. Why not allow for a digital? If digital's okay for home delivery, why not allow for a digital manifest in all instances?
We just wanted to keep it there, and it's something we can talk about in the future. We wanted to keep it again similar to those other two in there, just because we were talking about going back and forth between those two main licenses and not to throw anything off between something that one of the other licensees might be like.
Got you.
So,
Because I think for us, I mean, knowing it doesn't apply to home delivery, great. That was one thing I wanted to clarify. But I also think too, that I know further down here, you say, you may write notes and cross things out and stuff. I think it would alleviate the need, to do that. Because where we're seeing the biggest difficulty is not necessarily with home delivery, but it's when you're doing 4 or 5 deliveries from your processing facility. And then, you're off by 5 minutes on your estimated time of arrival, having to cross it out, write an initial, and then put a note in, right? I just feel like this would be a way that you could change those things, right? In real time. And we do it already on the home delivery side of things, right? If we're not going to get to a patient's house when we thought we would, right? We can change those things. So I think it would make sense to change all of the rules to allow for digital manifests.
Yeah, and I think that also as we move forward with these new ICS and things like that, that it's really something we could.
Awesome. Wonderful.
And real quick on this. I mean, so in talking about in here that, so they, I mean, they're gonna be documenting differences and they have to notify to the department, with the department, what's their action gonna be taking? If there's a
It
discrepancy.
probably depends on the situation, right? And it depends on what happens. So, what we don't obviously want is anything that's either could be considered illegal or anything that's even, non-compliant to be happening between that. I mean, it could be as easy as just notification, how you're gonna fix, could possibly lead to investigation type of situation, right? To see if there is some major type of non-compliance issue. I think what it is what we do want to maintain communication within the industry, and we know that it's also difficult when we're talking about the regulators being notified. But there's been situations this last couple of months where licensees have had something go on there, and we wanted them to, and we're glad that they did notify us, and we took a look at the information they sent and came back to them and said, hey, we've noticed some other things as well. It doesn't usually lead to a violation or anything as much as a conversation as to clarify and what we can do to help on both sides. So I would love to promise you that it might not cause something else, but that's kind of the goal currently and based on what we've seen recently.
And then are you guys gonna get to a point to address, because we're still getting a lot of conflicting directions to our delivery agents, to where some of them have to stay, some of them can leave. I mean, what's gonna be, I mean, at the end of the day, my delivery agent can't do anything about if they're off by one item.
Yeah. So, so probably to answer that question, if you drop to the bottom of our 685-10, so right above the minimum requirements for storage and handling. We did probably not to what you're gonna be happy with, Matt, but we always put in here, medical cannabis pharmacy may only receive medical cannabis products in the final packaging. The medical cannabis pharmacy may write notes on the manifest to document discrepancies, and a medical cannabis pharmacy may reject the shipment from a cannabis processing establishment. So that being said, we are not necessarily going to say that you have to stay in place or you don't have to stay in place, but we definitely feel at this run, and obviously we can have the conversation further here, is that we want those deliveries to be as correct as possible. And I would imagine anybody that you're seeing what type of thing.
Well, and that was gonna be my next question on here, is the rejection on there is, I mean, at that point, there will not be an accurate transport manifest. So how does a delivery agent then legally transport cannabis around the state if they can't have a manifest? If it's rejected?
And I think that the notes on both sides would have to be something we could look at that time as acceptable. If a pharmacy rejects that, and then you still have other ones to go into, you still got the other portions of the manifest that should be going to another pharmacy, but notes on both sides should be able to clarify.
All the more reason for digital manifests, right? To just be able to correct that stuff in real time. Because I think what we do now, right, is if there is a discrepancy, you usually try to fix it in real time, have someone prepare another manifest, try to send it over and stuff like that. But man, if it were digital and you could just have, you know, your laptop or your iPad to correct that, I think it would go a long way.
Thank you, Cody.
And as the industry would have to be the ones to kind of decide if that's something to do, right? As you mentioned, being off by one or two type of things, or if not saying that there's any quality assurance, you know, concerns. Personally, I'm not saying that there's gonna be a lot of people rejecting this, but maybe there's some situations that happens. You guys at the industry may know that, and I've seen things happen.
No, I do know there have been instances where, I mean, processors have delivered items that weren't requested to a pharmacy. They just said, hey, I'm being nice here, take more items. You're still paying me for it, but I mean, that would be an example where if they choose and they don't want it, they can just reject it at that point.
So just reject a portion of the,
Well, I don't know if you can reject a portion or all.
yeah, do you have
I
to
mean,
reject the entire shipment or do you just reject the non-conforming portion?
I think you could probably reject just the non.
And then that would just be why you'd write notes on the manifest and everything? Okay.
The minimum requirements for the storage of handling of cannabis, again, that is similar to the other licensees. But we haven't really seen an issue with this too much as we just want to make sure that everybody's on that same page. That it does take a little bit of the concerns from patients as well as pharmacies, as well as processors. Hey, maybe they didn't store it correctly, maybe whose fault is it for return, stuff like that. In hopes that we're not seeing very, I'd say, even problems with that at this point, but just we want to be again fair and use the same wording across the board.
I would point out on sub 3, if contaminants is going to be capitalized, that would suggest that it's a defined term. So you guys may want to add a definition for contaminants on R 66-5-11 sub 3. And then I can also tell you that there are not likely to be pesticides or fertilizers at a pharmacy. So you may be able to delete those words. I get you were probably just trying to make it consistent, but contaminants is probably more the question. If it's going to be capitalized, that suggests it's probably a defined term. So
It's just probably this on
That was an oversight.
yeah, no worries. You guys just cut and paste it. I understand. Make it easy. But I can tell you, if you leave it with pesticides and fertilizers, that will have no problem with being stored around those. So
We get to skip a couple of pages if you would, all the way to really, if you could follow page 10 under our 66519, which is changing operating plans. Again, this is something that especially the standalone pharmacies did not necessarily have a great idea about, because it's the Department of Health and Human Services handled change requests and things within their operating plans differently than we did. So we've seen that, and then there was a lot of questions. So again, it's just really adding the same language that we have in our cultivator and processor and lab rules to this, just saying, hey, we would like you to submit those operating plans. Let's take a look at it, make sure they're still in compliance with the regulations. And then possibly it may need to go to the board if possible, or if there's a need to. Pharmacy licensing and renewal. The next rule that we're going to talk about here is about license renewals for pharmacies. As you all know, that they have now been added underneath their licensing board, and so this is just the beginning of that aspect and what that should look like. Again, just making it consistent with the other licensees and also meeting that statutory requirement now. So to probably the thing we're going to talk more about here is the geographic regions. What we decided to do, based obviously on the rule where it says we looked at overall population, patient population, and travel time. We did take into a significant role in this is realizing the difference in not only geography, but population, just how the state of Utah is built overall, and trying to do that right. So anytime you look at regions and try to be fair within the state of Utah, you've got southern, southwestern Utah, you got southeastern Utah, you got central, you got Uinta Basin, which kind of sits over there by itself. And then you've got the Wasatch Front and the northern Utah, which all are distinctly different in how their population is dispersed, how close they are, how easy it is to get to locations throughout the state, which was one of the biggest things that we did put in there is travel time and that ability to get to current pharmacies right now. And what we ended up doing after a long discussion and a lot of talking was go to 8 regions. We both numbered them and named them. So if you don't like those, we can definitely make those changes. But what we went with was Region 1 in northern Utah, which was Box Elder, Cache, and Rich County. Region 2 was what we call the Weaver Basin region, has Davis, Morgan, and Weber. Region 3 was the Salt Lake region, had Salt Lake, Summit, and Twilla. Region 4, which we call the Uinta Basin region, has Daggett, Duchesne, and Uinta. Region 5 was West Central, has Juab, Sanpete, Utah, and Wasatch counties. Region 6, which we call Central, has Carbon, Emery, Miller, Paiute, Sevier, and Wayne counties. Region 7, what we call Southwest, has Beaver, Garfield, Iron, Kane, and Washington counties. And then Region 8 was Southeast, had Grand and San Juan counties. The last change to just to let you guys all know, and again, just to be more consistent with our other rules, the very last aspect of which is the violation categories, which just spells out the types of violations, whether public safety, regulatory violations, or licensing violations, and what those possible fines could be if it goes to that level.
Cody, can you speak to the regions and what the department plans to use those regions for?
First and foremost, and Dr. Forsythe can jump in here right now. I think first and foremost is we were trying to make it so we've seen there was a lot of discussion, a lot of concern over pharmacy movement. or this last time, and so it's to try and maintain that those, or at least one aspect, is to try and maintain that same patient population that are sent out gets to keep those, at least the same amount of pharmacies, maybe more in the future if that happens. And then, if, you know, again, if there are an addition, because we do see that there's a need for more rural types of pharmacies there, and we definitely don't want to see what we've seen happen or tried to happen recently, is where people, hey, I got one in Roosevelt and move it on to Salt Lake or Provo or something like that. So type of situation, or down in San Juan County, and right, which
So will you guys use these in considering the closed door pharmacies and where they may be located?
I think we have.
In the issuance of any
It
license.
it requires you to use these. Okay, so any issue,
They'll
license or
be
issue,
issued
okay,
for a specific region.
wonderful.
And the statute, I believe, states that there's to be a license in at least one license location in each region.
So I don't
No
remember.
more than
that.
3 by 2027.
Well,
That's in counties of first, and second class.
Oh,
Well, no,
yeah,
that's the total
The
number.
total.
Oh, you mean?
No
it's
more
like
than
a-
3 by 2027. Did they do the?
closed door
But-
pharmacy.
True,
No,
you're
just,
right, but
uh,
also only 3 may exist in counties of the first and second
Yes,
class.
yes,
Period.
yes. So both correct.
we can talk about this later, but if you go to 441A 1005 paragraph 1, that's what you're citing at the beginning of the rule.
Sure.
Right, yeah, so that's where the term geographic region is used, I believe. We were reviewing this earlier.
The department shall issue at least one license in each geographic region during each phase of issuing licenses.
Oh, yeah, so. If we enter into a new phase of issuing license.
Okay.
then we have to issue-
Okay,
They don't have to exist. As soon as we create. the-
So if you were to issue more licenses, if there are regions without, you would have to prioritize those first, right?
Believe so, yes.
Okay.
Although. We have to offer them for
Everyone, of course.
everyone to purchase, it doesn't necessarily mean. Like some places, it's not gonna make economic sense necessarily to open a
So
pharmacy.
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also that aspect too, that about if working with in conjunction with the board, obviously the Department of Health and Human Services, then the legislature, if looks like there's actually a need for it in a certain location. You know, let's say that there's, what do you saw like is right now?
Yeah.
There's those ones there. Let's say that they feel like there's a needed one in Salt Lake, that would obviously get the same type of priority as it would be.
Right.
Obviously, for people wanting to get into it, that that would be a high.
Yes, Salt
priority
Lake,
for them,
yes,
right?
for sure.
But yeah, so.
Do you know how many of these regions currently do not have a pharmacy located in there? 2 of them?
Yeah, it's pretty much the southeast. with
That was gonna be
Grand
one of my,
San
that was gonna be
Juan,
one of my
right,
guesses.
Both these ones.
Oh, and then up on the kind of more northeastern part, like the Vernal part.
Daggett.
There was supposed to be one there, but it got
Yeah.
moved.
So
Yeah.
one of the questions I have is, I mean, I know you referenced this as you looked at patient population. Normal Utah population, thoroughfare, things like that. I mean, the regions really. When I'm looking at them, one of the concerns that I see is that. I mean, we're continuing to put Salt Lake, Summit and Tooele County in the same region. And so, I mean, if again, someone is awarded and. I don't know, for some reason decides, hey, we want to put it at Tooele and that helps them with their application process. There's nothing stopping them to move it right back down into Murray. Because they're still within that same region. I mean, I don't know if there's a good solution to how the zoning is. It's a very difficult task. I mean, is the ability, and when I was looking at it online, I looked at more of the Department of Health and Human Services. Because they regionalize based off health. So I know I'm in Box Elder County and that's Bear River Health Department, and that encompasses Box Elder, Cache and Rich. I mean, they have 13 zones throughout the state. And regions, and really the biggest difference is going to be Salt Lake is its own region, Summit, Wasatch, Utah, Tooele. Davis is its own region, but then Weber and Morgan are together.
Right.
Other than that, most of your other classifications are about the same. And maybe some of the rural, and I mean, Utah actually, I did a lot of research on this and I learned too much, but Utah classifies, you have urban, rural and frontier. areas.
Mhm.
And so it's based on the number 6. So if you have 6 or more per square mile or 6 or less, then if it's 10 or more, then you're, or 100 or more, I can't remember what the last one was, but I mean, it is, I think as far as patient access goes, I understand that it is difficult to have more regions because the way statute is written is you're eventually gonna have to have one in every single one of those regions.
Yeah.
But if you look at how I split it off that way based off population counts, it actually evens it out quite better. Yes, Tooele is a little bit lower at 1,400 patients, but that's no different than Summit at 1,700. So I mean, there's still plenty of options for having the ability to get access to cannabis down the road. And I think really the most difficult one on there is going to be San Juan, because the San Juan's its own health department, and the current numbers, they only have 41 patients. But the only difference between that one and yours, you put Grand County in there, and it doesn't increase it by that much. But I think, I mean, if you are open to looking at additional access, I mean, I think that would then prevent the fear of what patients had is my pharmacy, I like it, it's working well, but they see, hey, I'd rather be in Salt Lake where it's growing, or, you know, I want instead of being, I want to be closer to Salt Lake, so let me move down to Farmington. I mean, I can't speak for Wholesome, but I'm sure if that pharmacy popped up in Centerville, they wouldn't be too happy about it. But at the end of the day, it's what's best for the patients. And so, I mean, is that something that you guys would look at, maybe expanding to mirror what the Department of Health does?
It's certainly something we can consider in the future. I don't see we don't have a whole lot of desire to change beyond these at this time, because these were considered as not only regional availability, but, you know, common corridors for Tooele. It would be great to have a standalone pharmacy out there. There is selective pressure for people to go out to Nevada instead of coming into Salt Lake. But a lot of people in Tooele tend to come into Salt Lake fairly regularly anyway. At some point, we have to move more towards a normal market, right?
Okay, well, that was my thing, is more regions, you're getting closer to a normal market, because at the end of the day, you shouldn't be relying on regions, it should be just what's
But
available.
by requiring somebody to have a pharmacy out in Tooele and not allowing them to move, if it doesn't make economic sense for them to remain in Tooele, moving into Salt Lake and having part of that market does make business sense for them potentially. So, you know, it's a matter of how overreaching we want government to be onto the market here.
You all would still have the ultimate say, though, on whether a pharmacy can move or not, right?
Ultimately,
Or-
they will be allowed.
They will be, because what the statute says is they can move within their region, correct?
And it does have to go to the board now, so.
So there still would be the chance for it to not be approved?
Yeah.
Okay, so there still would be a vote that would have to be taken by, and that's by the licensing board that will be under?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are obstacles to just being able to move your pharmacy willy-nilly, but I could legitimately see some instances where it becomes necessary for a pharmacy to move out of a particular county. And I'd hate to lock anybody into something that is completely untenable.
Okay, any more comments, or questions on this rule before we move to the other rule, the one about licensing? Make sure I lean forward. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next rule. Cody, go ahead, my man.
Thank you. Yeah, this one is almost completely based on statutory changes where legislature did make a change to move pharmacies underneath our licensing board, such as our other production licensees are. So just going over this, our 66-9, we added medical cannabis pharmacy as the definition, similar to what cultivation facility as well as production establishment and processing facility is in the definitions. Under R 66-9-3. This is pretty much if we go to add any more licensees, so be R 66-9-3 sub 5 refers to subsection 4-41A 1005 is that we will solicit for applications. Again, that's if there's a decision between the groups, again, DHHS, UDAP, legislature and so on to add more licenses as we just got done discussing. And then just going on to mention how we will not accept any applications unless they're complete, type of thing. That's if we are adding more licenses. And then it refers to 4-41A-1005, which is this really the list of things the statute has us consider when doing an application process for more licenses, type of thing. So kind of spell out the statute there. And then moving down to R66-9-4 in the department review, the first change that you see is in the sub 3, which removes the 30 days and changes that to a reasonable time. The reason that we did that was because our licensing board meets every 2 months, and we just were concerned that the wording 30 days was not allowing us to meet our own rule by waiting 30 or 60 days in between time. We also actually asked the licensees to send their application work or the renewal work in 30 days ahead of that, just so we can review it and then get it to the board. So very rarely is it getting there 30 to the board, 30 days ahead, it's getting to the department. So we just want to make sure we're getting it to the people that need to, and just in time that they can review it, but not put us in a quandary. There'll be some cleanup stuff where it used to be R68 and referring to other R68 portions of the rule, just making those change to R66-9 here. R66-9.5, we removed production establishment just to say cannabis licenses, now that we're including all licenses in this. Under R66-9-6, we just added medical cannabis pharmacy, which is the same thing for the rest of this rules, just adding medical cannabis pharmacy to the rule as what the board is going to be looking at for license renewals. And then actually naming R66-9-8, adding and plant to the title of that section. Should be fairly straightforward, just again, same as that, and then, like I mentioned, statutory cleanup. The additions, I should say.
All right, any questions or comments for Cody on that, the licensing rule? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item in our, I actually was gonna say, these will now go through your normal, you'll publish the rule, there'll be a comment period, and then it'll go into effect. Okay, wonderful.
And we are open to feedback from the board, obviously, so.
Yeah, I'll probably shoot you a follow-up email, Cody, just with those couple of things I mentioned today, just so you have them. But thanks for the
Yeah,
presentation.
and to that, put on record there that anybody in the industry or anybody obviously has that right to do that. And then once we have gone through this one more time and corrected that capital C and maybe some other numbers, we'll be getting that to the administrative rules office, and then there'll be that 30-day public comment period as well. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Cody. All right, we're going to turn to item number 6 on our agenda, which is patient cost in the medical cannabis program. From the board, this is being headed up by Desiree and Nanette. I do want to give them a chance to chime in here. I do know that DHHS and UDAF, I believe, have prepared a presentation. I guess my only question before I turn over to them is, if that presentation was prepared, is there a reason it wasn't shared with the board ahead of the meeting?
We just needed more time to work out the details of the presentation.
So
Right.
I do believe by our own, I mean, I'm not going to stop y'all from giving a presentation today, but I do believe by our own, order of the way we do things and procedures, it should not be presented today because it has not been given to us ahead of time. Nor does it sound like it was provided to the board a week ahead of the meeting. So I
Right.
guess just in the future, I think we should be cognizant of that. I feel a bit, I don't know how others feel, I feel a bit blindsided by this presentation and only became aware that you all were going to present something yesterday. So I think in the future, I think what applies to us as board members should also apply to DHHS and or UDAF. So with that, happy to let Nanette and Des take it away. And then we can get to the presentation from the departments.
Hello. So we, after we were asked to kind of head this up, we reached out to industry, we reached out to everyone in industry, and kind of posed some, I guess, some broad questions, and I think that was our biggest mistake. Just, hey, can you give us, so we reached out to so QMPs and industry, just anybody that was in part of this program that would affect patient cost. And so I think our questions were too broad. And we did not get a lot of feedback. I got a little bit from a couple members of industry, but it was very recent, so we wouldn't have had it done in time, and we knew that. We had one QMP reach out and give us some numbers. So what we're looking for is just looking at patient cost. Why is it the way that it is? And we realized in the last week, we reached out to Trevor and stuff and just said, look, we're going to need more time if we're going to present on this, because it's just going to take a lot of time to gather that. So that's when I believe they started working on a presentation to kind of show their side of things. The cost is for DHHS. So I feel like that's a good start to where we need to go. I think we need to all understand patient cost better. And where we kind of ended up is we're thinking about doing a questionnaire instead. So, and maybe we can spend some time today coming up with questions in this room of what we would like answered as far as cost goes, so we have a better direction on what questions to ask. And so anyway, so we were going to, see if the MCPAB board would be willing to send out a questionnaire and see if industry and QMPs would answer that and give us a better idea on how the cost is compiling to where it is. I also did reach out to some national organizations to get some costs around the country, and and they're working on that. Again, I don't think we're going to be too far off, but I would like to see what you guys have, just some comments on that. What do you guys think about that, doing it in a way that we maybe do a questionnaire that they answer from our board in order to better understand cost?
I mean, I can say I'm supportive of it. I think it'll help guide the conversation. I think it'll help determine better what information it is that you're seeking. So I'm all in favor of a good questionnaire and or survey. I would just say hopefully it'll leave things as open-ended as possible so people can provide, full feedback and not just check boxes. But otherwise, I think it's a great idea.
That's what we were looking at. And that was my original email, was like, hey, give me these things or anything else you can think of. And so it does need to be where they can add specific information, not just check boxes. This needs to be like, hey, how much does this cost a year? How much do you pay for pharmacists? How much do you pay for compliance officers? And whatever the questions. It's also hard for me because I'm not in those spaces. And so not knowing what questions to ask has been a little bit of a barrier, but I did speak with a lot of industry. I hope they're all in the room, because I like to only talk bad about people when they're in the room, but they're really good about getting things to right on the deadline. So now we've passed the deadline. Everybody's on board. I think we're going to be able to have something I'm hoping by July. If we do a questionnaire and then compile information, I think we should have something by July. But I think this, the medical cannabis cost to patients is a really great place to start. So then we can understand where, the why of where it's at.
Des, this is Matt. Can you explain what is your ultimately wanting to be your outcome with this?
So we want to, and that was decided by this board, we want to understand patient cost, why everything that adds up to make the decision of what we're charging patients, whether it be for their card, for their state fee, or at the pharmacy. And then we can start looking at ways that, with some fresh eyes, of ways that we can change things in order to reduce cost. So And I know, Matt, you've had struggle with that yourself. So like any information, like that you have in what cost, in your costs, and then how that ends up being what patients pay, like
Oh, I mean, I know
all
it
incredible information.
as a company and how it gets passed on to patients.
Well, I can add one thing from our last meeting. One of the comments was that expenses to some patients were, I can't remember what the context was. Let's say the physician provider. Some patients were paying, I'm just arbitrarily throwing out $150. Somebody else is paying $500.
Yep.
What is the justification if they're getting the same service? Why is it so variant?
Right. So, and
Justification that I think. I was-
exactly. And that's why we reached out to multiple, and I hope to have more QMPs answer that. I had one reach out and I have their numbers. They want to be careful with what's shared back, which I also think which will be better on a questionnaire, because then they know who they're giving the information to. They know that it's private or whatever. But you're completely right. We have patients that, like for me, I renew my medical cannabis card and it's a copay. And then we have patients that are paying $500. You have everything in between. You have patients that are being asked to renew every 3 months. We have patients that are being allowed to renew every year. So the more people that we can get to answer the survey, I think the better outcome we'll have. But we do have to understand that we can't change everything. But we can look at what other states have done, and we can look at things that maybe we're doing to drive up cost, and ways to maybe incentivize driving down cost. So anyway, that's
Well, and
I think the survey in conjunction with what DHHS just sent out today will give a good indicator between why patients have left and why we're having a retention problem and why maybe there aren't as many patients. So
yeah.
Yeah, Rich, go ahead.
Just one factor to consider in this is that without a legal requirement that any entity release information, they're not obligated to release it. So it does depend highly on the industry's willingness to share information. And so I'm just, the reality is it's going to be piecemeal, the data, because no one has to submit it. And it would be, that's just reality. So
Yeah,
it's not
and
complete.
Well,
I'm
I think,
open to a better idea, if anybody has a better idea of getting this, because it is, I mean, we're basically just asking, hey, will you help us understand, so we can better understand our role in this, and make changes as we see fit. But they don't have to give it to us. So
well, and I think what happened this time around, at least from the few folks I've spoken with, it was not a matter of an unwillingness. It was a timing issue, right? The email went out, only a few days ago now, I think what, 9 or 10 days ago, that Des sent her email out to industry members asking for that information. So I think it was more a timing issue than necessarily an unwillingness, type of issue. So I think now everyone does understand, but I also think a pointed survey will be better to solicit the information than just a broad approach, right? So we're hopeful we'll get more information, and honestly too, some of this information may be in the hands of the government, and a good grammar request or two can obtain some of that information, as well, to the extent it's not, protected information. So I am hopeful. Now look, it obviously does depend on, participation, but I've talked to at least a few licensees in the last day or so that certainly are willing to provide, some of this, this information. I don't think you're going to get confidential, business information or trade secrets. But I do think people do have some relevant information, that will inform this discussion, because it's a multifaceted, multi-sided discussion as to why a product costs what it costs. It's not just as simple as, this is what it costs to produce and this is what I'm gonna sell it at, right? There's a lot of things that are baked into, what a product is sold for, right? So I think it's good to have information from all sides, both from the departments as well as from, from the, those in the industry, so. Nanette, Des, anything else before we turn it over to DHHS?
No. But the email was sent out May 8th.
So 13 days
Yeah.
ago. At least I guess when I looked at it, I thought I saw a different one, but understood. I just think part of it is that's still a short period of time to come up with all the information.
Right, for sure.
Forms the costs of your products too, right? You know what I mean?
I think this is gonna take a couple months to pin this down and get all of the information and then done right. So that's what I'm saying, like probably possibly July, maybe, but yeah, I think let's do the presentation and
Yeah, but thank you to both of you for taking this on. Yeah, for sure. Nanette, go ahead if you had something.
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much.
And I also do know there are members of industry that are happy to help you to craft that survey. Even if we don't get to any of that stuff today, we certainly, I know there are members of industry. I know there's at least one in the room, myself as well, who would be happy to help you, put that survey together to get the information you're looking for, at least to solicit the information you're looking for.
I've talked to a couple in the last couple of days and I think industry is 100% willing. I think most of industry is going to be really, really helpful. And I think that, like JD just said, I've had even people offer help with the survey questions so we get the right questions. If there's any questions though from anybody on the board that they would like to see on there, please send them to us and then we will update you on any questions that we send out. JD can make sure that we do it in a way that's appropriate for the board. So we're not doing anything outside of board rules. But I would like any questions from you guys as well, or even AgriHealth that they want on there. Just let's make sure that we get this done right.
Just make sure you don't have a quorum. You can have whatever communications you necessarily want to, right? For the most part.
But I can email anything. Like I could send an email and say, this is the questions we're going to put on there. Correct?
Yeah, you just can't have a meeting of a quorum, right? You can have an email with all members on it, right? That doesn't constitute a quorum. It's an actual just meeting. So just don't meet with a quorum, but emails will be just fine because that won't be considered a quorum.
Just one thought about this is, by its nature, it is self-reported 100%. So people, and it could be one person may interpret one question one way and another interprets it another. So those are just factors to keep in mind. I think as this would be happening. Also to clarify, what the scope of it would be a survey for processors, for the cultivators, for the retail medical cannabis pharmacies, for the medical clinics as well.
I don't know about clinics. I'm not sure I can answer that because I believe Cammie and Chris, Dr. Morgan, are working on that portion of things, but I'll let Cammie speak to that.
Okay.
But I think what we were envisioning, or at least what Des, is my understanding is that was going to be, they were going to do the industry side of it, right? So those 4 different license types.
Okay.
But I believe for patient costs in relation to QMPs or RMPs, I believe Cammie and Dr. Morgan would work on that, but Cammie, you can speak to that if you'd like to.
Yeah. And we've already got some information in the presentation that touches on that.
So if they want to do their own kind of survey,
Sure.
if they think there's other ways to gather the data, but again, that would all be self-reported, as well, so.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. We will turn it over to DHHS for their presentation.
All right. I'm gonna stand so you're not all looking right over my head.
Before you start, I would ask that after the meeting, if it hasn't been done already, please provide
We will
copies of
post
this to members of the
post-haste.
board.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So hopefully, Des, can you hear me if I'm over here? Des and Nanette, sound good? Okay. Let's get started with our presentation. So I just want to provide some brief methodology for how we pulled these numbers. This is one of the reasons why it took a while to get this data and get it accurate for a presentation. Is For the sales and price data, you'll see that's retrieved from the inventory control system, or ICS. And the sales represented in dollar values include discounts. So it's not pre-discount. We know discounts are very big. You'll see those discounts included in order costs. Sales and price data use average or mean per patient who made purchases. So that would be the total dollar value of all the purchases divided by the number of purchases. So because we used mean or average, the patients who spend disproportionately higher amounts annually being calculated into that are going to skew the results, those average annual costs, a little bit higher than the typical spending of a median consumer. We did crunch the numbers on median consumers and found that the numbers were actually about half as much as the mean or the average. So for renewal times, we pull renewal time data from the electronic verification system, or EVS, and those renewal times are only for patients who are currently active. We didn't look at patients who are expired. For medical provider costs, we use the Utah Health Cost Compare website, which is self-reported data to DHHS by qualified medical providers. And that data is retrieved through an electronic survey, which now we actually have to conduct quarterly, according to the new law. So let's continue. So we split this up, patient costs, this broad topic into three categories: into application fees for your card, into provider visits, that would be initial visits and renewal visits, and finally purchases at a medical cannabis pharmacy. And you can see, you know, at a pharmacy, we have products, devices, transactions as well. And then we have our initial and renewal for both the card fee and the recommendation with your medical provider. So let's start with the easiest one, a card application fee. An initial and a renewal are $15 respectively. And a patient typically is going to be renewing annually. The law changed last year, correct, from 6-month cards to annual cards. So if we actually go to the next slide, oh, it's actually the slide after this one. Yeah, let's just visit here for a second. You'll see we pulled data from the past year on which issuance periods people or patients fell into, the overwhelming majority being those 12 months, which is the typical card. And a medical provider has the option to make that a smaller renewal period, which would mean you have to go back, pay for that renewal visit, as well as pay the $15 for your card again. But can we go back to the previous slide? Thanks, Abby. Here, one after this. Perfect. So here's those averages, long minimum and maximum to reported to the Health Cost Compare website. As I said, it's self-reported data. DHHS does audit medical providers to ensure data accuracy. And we are preparing for an audit to ensure the numbers are accurate, particularly as we get into quarterly reporting of these prices. So let's go. And we'll skip after this one, please. Perfect. So medical cannabis purchases, we have 3 categories. I split this up into our products or medicated devices, they're called in the system, or excuse me, non-medicated devices. Products are medicated devices. Well, geez Louise. Products.
You're out of
Are
practice.
medicated products. Products are medicated products. Devices are non-medicated products. And then finally, the transaction fee. I'm going to turn it over to Cody to talk about products and devices, and I'll come back to talk about transaction fees.
Thanks, Trevor. As Trevor mentioned, that DH's asked me to summarize the next couple of slides here. Should be pretty straightforward. So this slide here shows you going back to 2020, where the first pharmacy opened in March. And there was a slow growth in pharmacies opening and also the amount of product available, right? 2020 was just the beginning of it, and we grew, that was some growing pains at the very beginning, with some starting pains. Patients that year spent an average of $700 per year on products. We saw a doubling of that amount in 2021. And then almost a $200 increase in 2022. And we've had a slight drop in 2023 to the average amount of money a patient's spending per year. This slide is the average spend on a single item each April and October from 2020 to the present. You can see the low amounts were the lowest amounts were 2022 and late 2022 and early 2023 at approximately $41.25 per product. I'm going to go to the next slide. And then this slide shows that the average total amount that a patient was spending on all medical cannabis products in a month. We can see that we started higher, probably due to the high prices, but the amount has dropped with some occasional mild increases until now, where the patients are spending $90 less a month in pharmacies than they did 4 years ago.
Do you want to talk about devices?
No, because you said 8 to 11. That's true.
I did.
I don't know that UDAP has a lot to say about devices anyway. Those are really discretionary purchases for patients. They don't necessarily need those to use their medication. So that's effective.
Yeah, if there's one takeaway we can see, it does seem to, the exception of, about 70 some cents between 21 and 22 has come down by about $12 or so, $13. Let's go ahead, Abby. Great. So talking about the transaction fee, every transaction at a medical cannabis pharmacy must collect a $3 fee each time. That's for the total order, not per item or anything. So we rounded the average orders in a year, which you can see on the left, and then just multiply that by 3 to see what a patient's paying in those transaction fees. And right now, or as of last year rather, we had $45 an average transaction rate of 15 in a year. Thanks, Abby. So here's the final slide of our average or mean total cost for a patient. This is using 2023's data, our most recent full capture. And this assumes we are talking about someone who has a 1-year card. But if we see 15 initial and renewal for the card application, those two prices for an initial and renewal, according to the cost compare website, our data from the inventory control system for products and devices and transaction fee adds up to a grand average total of $2,055.42 in 2023 for the average cost for a patient. But with that, that is the end of our presentation. We can leave these up if this helps you. Would you prefer that if we left that last slide up? Okay, we'll leave that up, and otherwise happy to answer any questions on how we retrieve this data.
I'm guessing you don't have any comparative statistics with other states. So I know at some point, like I remember, what was it, 2 legislative sessions ago, there was the study on price comparison. We were kind of middle of the road, for products. Have you guys done any kind of analysis to determine where this kind of lands in the realm of, medical only states? What the average patient cost is in Utah versus other medical only states? Or do you even have access? Do you guys even have access to that kind of data?
Oh, we don't, but what we did in the past, when we did a presentation before the medical cannabis governance structure board, right? The legislature, what we did for that was we just looked on websites.
To see what you could find.
Right, to literally check and see what things looked like in Utah and in other states. And we did it with help from, right? And then that was summarized in the data that was presented in the presentation before the legislative committee. Yeah.
I don't have numbers on.
We do have price per gram, the national average for flour in that study.
Right, yeah, and that would be specific to flour. Mhm.
Yeah, I think it would be useful. I mean, Dr. Forsythe did just mention that some of this was, factored into the market analysis. So maybe next month, or when this comes back in front of the board in July, it might be useful to see where we can compare to, because I mean, you can look at that number, right? And to some that may seem low, some it might seem high, some really high, but I think comparatively, I think it would be worth it. But if unless things have changed drastically, I imagine we're probably still middle of the road, but couldn't say.
It didn't in the market analysis this year, that price per gram in other states, it seemed we were a pretty comparative
Yeah, for medical. If
for
you-
medical.
If you
market.
consider rec, then it's still high, but
Yeah.
that's always.
For medical, it averages like $15 per gram in Utah.
But one thing that study didn't take into account was cost for a card and those types of things, right? Nothing, QMP cost and those types of things yet. I think that would be the one, we talked about that, right? You know, with additional study, I think that would be useful, right? Because although not a major portion of this cost, right, as we can see, still, you know, a few $100s, you know, a year, it would be interesting to know, because I think we are obviously studying all patient costs.
It is one of the most difficult parts of doing these types of studies across the United States, though, is every state has a slightly different setup, like.
A different
their
model.
Taxes,
Mhm.
fees that are associated with these purchases. So it is really hard to look at and trust any of this data.
It's not true.
that I've looked at. Yeah.
Right.
Well, what I find interesting is the devices part, because in Utah, we're not able to combust, right? So you can't go out and buy a really cheap device. You're required to buy the vaporizers if you want to use whole flower. So that's an offset that nobody has a choice on. You can't buy them online. You can't find discounts. You can't get them shipped across states. And I'm talking devices that cost $250 to $900. So I find that device, yes, there are vape carts that are $20, but devices are much more expensive than that, and we're required to. We are not allowed to combust.
And
So-
how often are you having to buy a new device? Because that's something
Well,
that
there's repairs. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
yeah, I mean,
there's-
it's not a one and done. You can spend
No.
$180, $400 on a device, and that it may last a year, I'm understanding.
Yeah, or specific items that get worn out, like wear and tear, that have to be replaced every couple of months because you're dealing with cannabis and terpenes and stickiness and, you know, so many other things. But yeah, it's a large amount of money.
Okay, any thoughts or questions from anybody else on the board? We didn't have was anybody signed up for public comment on the last issue or this one? Do we have had anyone online raise their hand? Okay, Lucy, please, we're gonna unmute you. Please introduce yourself, state any affiliation you have, and then please take 2 minutes to make your comment.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for your time. My name is Lucy Jem. I am a patient and a pharmacy agent for Wholesome Co. I actually did have a question, and I'm not sure how far back this should go, but it's actually regarding access to medical patient cards. In the last meeting, you mentioned something about no longer emailing the card to the patient. I just wanted clarification on that.
Yeah, I mean, this really doesn't relate to the meeting, but since it's a pretty simple question or the agenda item, if anyone does have an answer, Rich, you probably have an answer since you guys all still handle the cards. You can go ahead and answer. And we don't have a lot of public comment for today anyway, so happy to take the question.
Right, so the question, if I understand it right, you heard something at the last meeting, Lucy, and it was that the DHHS, when we issue a card, we would no longer be emailing a PDF of that card to the patient in the new Salesforce software that we'll be launching later this summer. And the response to that is it won't be an attachment. There will be a link in the email to where the individual would be able to go print out that. So it would require that the individual log in to the EVS and click where they would have that PDF within their account and print it out. And they'd have to do that if they were getting it as an attachment. the reason why we've changed that is that in the new system, we got some input from our security people saying it is more secure in an effort to protect patient information. If you do not send information as an attachment that has patient information as a PDF. So we're avoiding sending it as a PDF because of the concern about keeping that information private. And we want it to be a link, so rather than having the risk of someone that should not be receiving information, seeing that information in an attachment, it's just giving them a link. So they have to log in to the system, and then it's a double check to make sure that they are who they say they are, and they're able to print it out that way. If at any time in the new software, a patient needs help printing it out, they're able to do that at the medical cannabis pharmacy, or they could do that also at the medical clinic where they were issued a card. So that is the only thing that's changing. The only thing that's changing is that we're not sending it as an attachment. It's just can be accessed through a link in that same email in the future. Does that answer your question, Lucy?
It does. Thank you so much. I was just curious of how this would affect the patients that don't have the resources or the ability to print their own cards. So I appreciate you clarifying that. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, with that, I think unless we have anyone else, doesn't look like it, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And I don't think there's no board action. Obviously, this is an ongoing discussion. Really appreciate the presentation from DHHS and UDAF. I think very informative. I do look forward to the board's presentation, hopefully in July or potentially later. So any more discussion from anyone on the board? If not, we'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 7 on the agenda. So last month we talked about, I think, and a lot of this I think came from kind of two places. Obviously, Trevor's role with the board has changed a little bit over the last couple of months, and I also think the board is wading into some issues that I think could use some more input, not only from board members, but also from stakeholders or other interested members of the public. And so I put together a short little memo. I won't read all of it, but regarding setting up some standing committees or ad hoc committees at times when we need them to assist the board with their business. I think this will do two things. Not only do I think it will help inform the board, I think it'll help fill in some of the gaps left by Trevor's role changing a little bit, but I also think it will allow board members with certain areas of expertise to get onto certain committees and provide that expertise to the committee. I think it will also help kind of prepare folks to potentially take on different roles within the board, at some point becoming a board chair or a vice chair and some things like that. So this isn't too super long. Obviously Matt was on this with me. I'll let Matt speak to anything. But at least today I do plan to make a motion myself to the board to approve the formation of a standing committee for pharmacies. So I, as the pharmacy representative, would be on that committee, but also other folks, even potentially here in the room, Mindy Medeo, other pharmacists, either PICs or PMPs, or others that are involved in pharmacies, and even other board members. I could see a world where maybe Dr. Morgan could have some input on this. We're not going to just set up a small little group and then not allow anyone in. I'm open to having all 15 PICs sit on this committee with me. I'm also willing to have 2, 3, however many. I really think what this will allow us to do is it'll allow us to brainstorm agenda items. It'll allow us to then bring those forth to Trevor, to have Trevor do the research and write the memos for us. We then, though, as the committee members, would come up with the proposals that we would present to the board, and then we could designate people to do the presentations. I really see this as kind of a good way to kind of, address the concerns that DHHS maybe had about Trevor's role and him doing presentations, and whether that was being on behalf of the department or whoever it was. And it'll still allow him to do the research and provide, writing for us, but it'll then put the onus on either individual board members, as part of those committees or the full committees to come up with the proposals and then to do the presentations. So with that, that's about all the more. I think the memo is pretty self-explanatory. Matt, if you've got anything to add, I think now would be a good time.
Yeah, no, as reading through this and looking into it, I think it's the ability for us as board members to use the expertise and why we've been appointed to this board to help navigate the Utah medical cannabis kind of the direction and how we see it can best fit the industry and the patients. And I think as it is, will be smaller groups, we can work with others. And as we're presenting the data and our proposals, that it's not just relying on Trevor to provide us with the information or how we feel it. It's really doing what the board is here intended for, is to make changes to this industry to make it a good, long-lasting and sustainable market.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Any thoughts from anyone else before I guess I make the first motion? And honestly, I put in the memo that I envision there being kind of an RMP or QMP standing committee, probably in, a processor and cultivator standing committee. But I think there can be ad hoc committees over time and other standing committees, right? So happy to take as many motions today. Since I wrote the memo, I figured we should at least have one motion to establish one committee today to kind of get it kicked off, but happy to see this develop over time. And I think the ad hoc committees, as issues come up, if they don't seem to fit into a standing committee, or you say, I have an issue I'm really passionate about, I'd love to head up an ad hoc committee to research that and put that agenda item on and stuff too. I really think this can be anything. And as you can see from our bylaws, it says the board may establish standing or special committees and subcommittees. Any proposals of a committee or subcommittee will be brought to the board for a full vote. So it'll work the same way. And to piggyback off of Matt, I think it'll allow Trevor to do what Trevor is best at, which is research and writing. And then it will allow us as board members and our expertise to craft proposals and to do presentations. So I think these committees will create a nice balance. So there's not a question of what is Trevor's role or not Trevor's role, what's my role as a board member, what's not my role. And I think effective committees, I think similar to the governance working group, right? I think that has made them more effective as cannabis lawmakers, right? And I think it also allows people to see a little bit more of the process. And for me, as someone who's not I'm not a pharmacist by trade, right? I'm a lawyer by trade, right? I don't have all of the same expertise as say Mindy would have, or others that may be involved in the pharmacy space. So to me, I think this is a way to also be more inclusive of the different stakeholders. And I'd love to, I know Kent's not here today. I know Jimmy is. I'd love to see Jimmy put together, potentially a law enforcement, either standing committee or ad hoc, any of you. Because I think we have a lot of expertise to share as members, but I also think there's a lot of expertise out there that this will be a formal way to bring that together and then bring these issues in front of the board. So if anybody else would like to speak, great. If not, happy to make a motion.
The thought that I had in mind when I read this proposal was this may also be an opportunity as the Cannabis Research Review Board is sunsetting. And the Center for Medical Cannabis is developing its strengths at the university, but still very much in its infancy and getting established. We seem to have a little bit of a gap. And who's answering some of those research questions and to whom can research-based questions be addressed to? So I think a subcommittee, even if it's just information gathering, might be useful for the research community as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
To give a voice.
All right, anything from anyone else? Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion. I motion that the board approves the creation of a pharmacy representative standing committee.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Abby, will you please take the roll call vote? I still think we have a quorum. Yes, we do, even though Des had to jump off.
I'm here.
Oh, you are. Oh, I just can't see you. Sorry.
Nanette Beresny,
Yay.
Tammy Clark,
Yes.
Desiree Hennessy,
Yes.
Jimmy Higgs.
No, he's still on. Says he isn't, he? He's supposed to leave at 4:45. May have stepped away.
Wait,
We can continue the vote.
Back to him. JD Lorenzen,
Yes.
Chris Moore, oh, Chris is gone, Matthew Page
yes,
and Misty Smith.
Yes.
All right, I find that that passes by a majority vote with 2 absent and 1 abstaining, I guess we'll say.
Sorry, if you guys were calling on me, sorry, I was on the other line. I vote yes, it's fine. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy. Appreciate you. All right, would anyone else like to make a motion for any other committees at this time? If not, we can revisit those next month because they do have to come in front of the board. So,
I'll make a motion for just the cultivator and processor one. Just, I know there's gonna be some changes in probably this summer as things go through, so I can get something going.
okay, I'll second that motion. Abby, will you take the roll call vote when you get a second?
Is cultivator.
And
And
processor.
processor.
subcommittee.
Okay, Nanette Beresny,
Yes.
Tammy Clark,
Yes.
Desiree Hennessy,
Yes.
Jimmy Higgs,
Yes.
JD Lorenzen,
Yes.
Matthew Page,
Yes,
Misty Smith.
Yes.
All right, I find that passes with a vote of a majority vote with 2 absent. Okay, looks like we're on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is next month's meeting. We did talk about at least one of the items on the agenda will be voting for a new chair and a new vice chair. If you are interested in running for either of those 2 positions, of course, you don't have to make that known until next month's meeting. But if you do, if that is already something you would like and you would like to be considered and have, have yourself voted on for one of those 2 positions, please let us know ahead of time if you can by reaching out to either Trevor or to Abby to inform them of that. But outside of that, I'm not sure that we necessarily, we'll meet on Thursday, for our normal, agenda setting, and planning meeting. But if anybody has anything right now that they absolutely want to see on next month's agenda, it would be a perfect time to bring that up.
We'll probably have at least 2 rules to read.
Okay. Do you know what those rules will be for?
That should be for sure it'll be the processor rule
Okay,
as well as the quality assurance testing rule.
okay. And is that likely, the quality assurance testing, is that just going to be,
There's some slight changes to some microbials, just like I'm just clean up wording, just use some different wording, things like that. Dr. Forsyth will be able to explain it better.
okay, but not necessarily like instituting something new in relation to, okay. And then for the processor, will that be something similar? Is it more of a cleanup or is there substantive changes
There's some
coming?
subsequent changes.
Okay,
And then DHHS will also have some proposed rule changes that we'll want some input on, and
okay,
you'll get copies of it prior. And you could decide which ones you want to put on the agenda and which maybe not.
okay. I know that generally the way UDAF has done it is they come and present the rules, get our feedback, and then go and publish them. Will you all do it similarly, or are you all going to publish them and then just give us a chance to comment during the meeting?
We're gonna, prior to publishing, give you.
Okay, so the same way that
Yeah.
they've done it. Okay, wonderful. I think that's consistent. So if you do make any changes to the rules we discussed today, those won't likely come back in front of the board. You'll just make those and then publish them?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Just wanted to make sure I just understood the process.
If there was a significant one that we felt needed to be viewed by the board, but
Yeah.
if they're just minor clerical.
Yeah, Cody had mentioned that the testing rule will be more kind of clerical changes, but the processor rule may have some substantive changes. So again, I think that's the best way to do it, is get that in first. Okay, wonderful. Anything from anyone else on the board in an agenda item that they'd like to see added for next month? Of course, you're welcome to get in touch with us over the course of the next couple of days. You're also always welcome. We have a running list of agenda items. So yeah, if anybody has anything now, great. If not, yeah, hour and 15 minutes early. Impressive. We didn't go 2 hours. All right, if that's it, I will take the most popular motion of the day.
Motion to adjourn.
All right,
Second.
all right, not debatable. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We only got an hour back.